What if I told you that the food you've been pouring into your dog's bowl every single day might be slowly killing them? Not because you're careless, but because the pet food industry has hidden the truth in plain sight. Behind those colorful bags with pictures of juicy steak and fresh vegetables lies a dark reality. Your dog could be eating industrial waste, toxic chemicals, and even traces of lethal drugs ingredients that no loving owner would ever knowingly feed. When I first uncovered this, I couldn't believe it myself. How could something so trusted, something sold in every supermarket, actually be linked to obesity, diabetes, liver failure, and even cancer in dogs? And yet, here we are, millions of pet owners unknowingly fueling sickness instead of health. This isn't just another story about bad dog food. This is about deception, hidden dangers, and the uncomfortable truth no one in the industry wants to talk about. And today, we're going to expose it ingredient by ingredient. Welcome to the Nutrition Institute, where we reveal the facts that others are too afraid to say. If you care about your dog's life, stay with me until the very end. And don't forget, subscribe now so we can continue uncovering the truths that truly matter. When I think back to the first time I really looked at the back of a dog food bag, I remember the sinking feeling in my stomach. For years, I had trusted the glossy front label, the pictures of fresh chicken, bright carrots, and shiny peas. It all seemed so wholesome, so reassuring. As someone who truly loves my dog, I believed I was giving them the best possible nutrition. I thought, surely the companies that make pet food know what they're doing. Surely these products are safe. But one day, out of sheer curiosity, I turned the bag around and started to read the ingredients list. And that was the beginning of a complete shock, one that changed the way I looked at pet food forever. Here's the strange part. On the surface, the words don't look that scary. Ground corn, meat and bone meal, soybean meal, animal fat. At first glance, they sound like real food. But the deeper I dug, the more horrifying it became. It felt like peeling back a layer of glossy paint to find mold and rot underneath. Let's start with corn, not the kind of corn you buy at a summer barbecue sweet. Golden, fresh off the cob. No, the corn in most dog foods is dent corn, a hard, starchy grain grown in massive fields, mostly for livestock feed. It's cheap, it's genetically modified, and it's sprayed with chemicals like glyphosate, a herbicide that has been linked to cancer. Sometimes this corn sits in storage for months, even years, gathering a dangerous mold toxin called aflatoxin, also linked to cancer and liver damage. And here's the kicker. Because corn is often listed as the very first ingredient, that means it's the main component of the food. So, while we imagine our dogs are getting a meat-based diet, in reality they're eating bowls full of cheap, starchy filler. And what does that starch do inside their bodies? The same thing it does to humans. It spikes blood sugar, contributes to weight gain, and paves the way for metabolic problems like fatty liver, obesity, and eventually type 2 diabetes. I remember reading that the average bag of dog food contains nearly 50% carbohydrates. Even though labels aren't required to show it, it felt like discovering a dirty little secret that our dogs are being put on a high-carb, high-sugar diet that their bodies were never designed for. Then there's the so-called meat and bone meal. On paper, it sounds like a natural source of protein, right? But in reality, it's one of the most disturbing parts of the story. The pet food industry uses what are called the 4DS, meat from animals that are dead, dying, diseased, or disabled. That means roadkill, farm animals that never made it to slaughter, even pets from shelters that were euthanized. And yes, tests have found traces of pentobarbital, the very drug used to put animals to sleep in some dog foods. Think about that for a moment. The very substance used to end a dog's life could end up in another dog's dinner bowl. As if that wasn't shocking enough, the process used to create meat and bone meal makes it even worse. It's called rendering. Basically, they throw all the carcasses into a giant vat and cook them at extremely high temperatures until they're reduced to a uniform gray powder. Sure, this kills bacteria and pathogens, but it also destroys nearly all the nutrients. Whatever might have been valuable in organ meats or bones gets obliterated, leaving behind a lifeless filler that masquerades as protein. I remember sitting there, staring at the words on the bag, and feeling a mixture of anger and guilt. Anger at the companies that had marketed this as complete and balanced nutrition, and guilt because I had been unknowingly feeding it to my own dog. And it doesn't stop with corn and meat meal. Soybean meal is another common ingredient. Again, it sounds harmless, maybe even healthy. We think of soy as a plant-based protein, something that could provide balance. But the soy used in pet food is far from the wholesome edamame served in a Japanese restaurant. It's industrial soy, genetically modified, heavily processed, extracted with a solvent called hexase, which is literally a chemical found in gasoline. This isn't real food. It's a lab created powder stripped of most nutrients with leftover compounds that can interfere with hormones, thyroid function, and even reproductive health in dogs. And then there's animal fat. At first, that one made me pause. I thought, well, dogs love fat. Isn't that natural? But once again, the truth was darker. The label often says animal fat, a source of omega-6 fatty acids, which seems oddly specific. The reason is that much of this fat isn't fresh fat from a healthy animal at all. It can include recycled restaurant grease and cheap seed oils, heated and reheated until they're oxidized and toxic. These fats damage cells, inflame the body, and are considered carcinogenic. On top of that, they're preserved with chemicals like BA and BHT, which are recognized as carcinogens in other countries and banned in Europe, but in the U.S., perfectly legal to use in dog food. As I pieced all this together, I couldn't help but think of the irony. Pet food companies cover their bags with pictures of happy dogs, juicy steaks, and fresh vegetables, when in reality, what's inside is more like a chemical cocktail of fillers, toxins, and industrial leftovers. The first time I realized all this, I went back to the image of my dog, eating so eagerly from her bowl. She trusted me. She wagged her tail, looked up with those bright eyes, and ate every bite as if it were a gift. And all the while, I had no idea what I was really giving her. That's what broke me. It wasn't just about bad ingredients, it was about trust. The trust between me and my dog. And the trust I had placed in an industry that clearly didn't deserve it. That's why, to me, this isn't just about nutrition. It's about betrayal. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pouring food into the bowl without wondering what's really inside. And maybe that's the point. Maybe we're supposed to question it. Maybe loving our dogs means not just feeding them, but protecting them from hidden toxins, from cheap shortcuts, from a system that values profit over health. Because in the end, our dogs don't get to choose, we do. And the choices we make will decide whether they thrive or whether they slowly get sick from the very food we trusted. The more I dug into the ingredients hiding in dog food, the more disturbing the picture became. It was like pulling on a thread that just kept unraveling. What looked at first like a few questionable fillers turned into an entire system built on cutting corners, disguising waste, and selling it back to us as nutrition. Take soybean meal, for example. At first, it seems like a reasonable idea. Soybeans are full of protein, right? But the truth is, the soy in pet food isn't the kind you'd want anywhere near your dog's bowl. It isn't organic soybeans steamed and served whole. It's genetically modified soy, grown in massive monoculture farms, heavily sprayed with pesticides, then processed using harsh chemical solvents like hexane. The result isn't wholesome protein, it's an industrial byproduct, stripped down, incomplete, and often contaminated. Worse yet, compounds in soy can mess with hormones. Studies have shown that soy phytoestrogens may interfere with thyroid function and even reduce testosterone levels. For a pregnant dog, that could mean lasting effects on her puppies. Imagine feeding your pet something that could quietly disrupt their hormones, all because it was cheaper for a company to use than real meat. Then there's the matter of animal fat. On paper, it looks innocent enough. Dogs like fat gives flavor. But when you read the fine print and discover phrases like a source of omega-6 fatty acids, alarm bells should ring, because what that really means is that this isn't simply natural animal fat. Much of it is recycled grease, the kind scraped from the fryers of fast food restaurants. Picture those vats of oil used over and over again until they're dark, sticky, and full of broken down molecules. Now imagine that same oil being poured into your dog's food. It's oxidized, rancid, and inflammatory. And because it spoils so quickly, manufacturers lace it with chemical preservatives BHT, and ethoxyquin. These are substances banned in many countries because of their cancer risks, yet somehow still allowed in American pet food. Think about that contradiction. If it's too dangerous for human food, why should it be acceptable for the animals we love? The answer is simple but brutal, because dogs can't complain. They can't file lawsuits. They can't stand in front of Congress. The industry counts on their silence, and by extension, our ignorance. But perhaps the most disturbing ingredient is one most people overlook: meat and bone meal. We already touched on it, but the deeper you go, the more horrifying it gets. This protein source can include animals that were never fit for human consumption, cows that died from disease, chickens too sick to be sold, even roadkill scraped off highways. All of it gets trucked to rendering plants, ground together, and boiled until it's unrecognizable sludge. From there, it's dried into a powder and labeled as meal. And it doesn't stop with livestock. Investigations have revealed that euthanized pets, cats, and dogs sometimes end up in this rendering process too. That means the kibble you're pouring into your dog's bowl could contain traces of other pets. It's a thought so grotesque that it's hard to wrap your head around, and yet it's a documented reality. And let's not forget pentobarbital, the euthanasia drug, which has been detected in multiple pet food brands. Even tiny amounts of it represent not just a betrayal of trust, but a chilling reminder of what corners are being cut to keep costs down. Now let's consider fillers like corn gluten meal and wheat middlings. They sound like fancy grains, maybe even healthy, but really, they're just the leftover scraps from industrial processing, what's left behind after making ethanol or milling wheat for flour. Cheap, low in nutrients, and nearly impossible for dogs to digest properly. They're not included because they're good for your pet. They're included because they pad out the weight of the bag at a fraction of the cost of real food. And then there are the artificial colors: red 40, yellow 6, blue 2. Why would anyone put food coloring in dog food? Certainly not for the dog's benefit. Dogs don't care what color their kibble is. The dyes are there for us, the owners, to make us feel like what we're buying is more natural or balanced. When we see green or orange bits, we imagine peas and carrots, but it's nothing more than marketing manipulation. And while the colors make no difference to dogs, they can make a dangerous difference to their health. Some of these dyes have been linked to behavioral problems and even tumor growth in humans. Do we really want to expose our pets to the same risks? The more I thought about it, the more it felt like a cruel magic trick. Sleight of hand, distract the customer with bright pictures and clever packaging while slipping toxins and fillers into the product. And because regulations don't require pet food companies to list carbs or sugars on labels, another layer of deception remains hidden. Imagine buying cereal for your child and having no idea how much sugar it contains. We'd never tolerate that. Yet when it comes to dogs, the rules are looser and the consequences are devastating. So what happens when dogs eat this kind of food day after day, year after year? Their bodies begin to break down. They develop obesity. Their livers struggle to filter out toxins. Their joints inflame under the weight of excess fat. Their blood sugar rises, opening the door to diabetes. Their cells accumulate damage, increasing the risk of cancer. And all the while, we as owners wonder why our beloved companions are slowing down, getting sick, or passing away too soon. Here's the painful truth. It's not bad luck. It's not simply genetics. In many cases, it's the food, the very food we were told was safe. But if all of this sounds bleak, there's also hope. Because once you know the truth, you have the power to change it. You don't have to settle for the cheapest bag on the shelf. You don't have to accept the status quo of complete and balanced labels that hide more than they reveal. You can start by reading the ingredients with a critical eye. Ask yourself, do I recognize these foods? Would I eat them myself? If the answer is no, why would I give them to my dog? Better options do exist. Foods with real fish, like salmon or whitefish, foods with peas, lentils, and flaxseed. Ingredients that come from nature, not from a chemical plant. Yes, they cost more. But then I think about the vet bills that pile up when a dog develops diabetes, arthritis, or cancer. I think about the heartbreak of losing them years too soon. And suddenly, the cost of better food doesn't seem so high. In the end, it comes down to love. Love is not just cuddles on the couch or walks in the park. Love is protection. Love is making hard choices to keep someone safe, even when they can't understand why. My dog trusts me completely, and she has no idea what's in her bowl. That responsibility falls on me. And when I realized what was really hiding in those bags of kibble, I knew I could never go back. The deeper I went into this subject, the more I realized that the problem with dog food isn't just about dogs. It's about us too. Because when you step back and look at the bigger picture, the story of pet food is almost identical to the story of human food. It's about profit over health, convenience over quality, and marketing over truth. And when I finally connected those dots, I felt a strange mix of anger, sadness, and a strange kind of clarity. Think about it. We live in a world where entire supermarket aisles are lined with brightly packaged, highly processed foods for people, cereals with cartoon characters on the front, snacks colored with artificial dyes, microwave meals filled with preservatives. They're cheap, they're convenient, and they're marketed as if they were healthy. But when you flip the package over and read the ingredients, you realize how much of it is just sugar, salt, refined starch, and chemicals. Sound familiar? It's the same sleight of hand that pet food companies use on us, just targeted at a different audience. And just like with dogs, we see the consequences in ourselves. Rising rates of obesity, children developing type 2 diabetes at younger and younger ages, adults struggling with fatty liver, arthritis, heart disease, the same illnesses that show up in dogs fed on cheap kibble are showing up in us for the very same reasons. It's not just coincidence. It's diet. That's when it hit me. The health of our pets is a mirror of our own choices. If we are willing to accept low quality, chemical laden food for ourselves, then it becomes easier to accept the same for them. But if we demand better for them, maybe it's a reminder to demand better for ourselves too. I remember looking at my dog one evening as she curled up on the couch, breathing softly in her sleep. She doesn't know about aflatoxins or glyphosate or oxidized seed oils. She doesn't know about preservatives or fillers. All she knows is that she trusts me to give her something safe, something nourishing. That trust is absolute. And it struck me, how often do we extend that same trust to the food industry, assuming they have our best interests at heart? How often do we hand over our health or our dog's health without question? The truth is, industries, whether human food or pet food, aren't built on trust. They're built on margins. They use psychology to distract us from the truth. Bright packaging, comforting slogans, words like balanced, complete, wholesome. But when you strip away the branding and look at what's actually inside, the reality tells another story. And here's the uncomfortable part. Change isn't easy. For me, it meant acknowledging that I had been wrong, that I had fed my dog things that may have harmed her, that I had let my guard down because it was easier to believe the comforting story on the package than to face the ugly reality of what was really in it. That's a hard truth to swallow. But here's what I've learned. Guilt doesn't help, but awareness does. Once you know, you can choose differently. Once you understand what's hiding in those brightly colored kibbles, you can decide whether you want to keep supporting it or not. And once you realize how much this mirrors the human food system, you can even start to change your own habits alongside your dog's. For me, it became almost symbolic. If I was willing to put in the effort to find better food for my dog, real fish, real vegetables, fewer chemicals, then why wouldn't I do the same for myself? If I was willing to pay a little more for her health, why not invest the same in my own? It's all connected. And here's the inspiring part. When we change the way we feed our pets, we're not just improving their lives, we're also sending a message to the industry. Every dollar we spend is a vote. Every time we reject the cheap fillers and chemical lace formulas, we're telling these companies, this isn't good enough. We demand better. And over time, that can shift the entire market. We've seen it already in the rise of organic foods, both for people and pets. Consumers woke up, started asking questions, and slowly but surely, companies had to respond. I also think about community. Imagine what would happen if more pet owners started having this conversation openly, if instead of just trading cute dog photos online, we also shared knowledge about what's really in our pets' food. If we compared labels, called out shady ingredients, and spread awareness, the more we talk about it, the harder it becomes for the industry to hide behind its glossy packaging. And maybe that's the real power here. Not just one person learning the truth, but a community of owners deciding that their dogs deserve better. Because at the end of the day, dogs aren't just pets, they're family. They give us unconditional love, loyalty, and joy every single day. The least we can do is give them food that honors that bond, not food that slowly poisons them. I think the most haunting question I keep coming back to is this: if our dogs could speak, what would they say about what we feed them? Would they thank us, or would they wonder why we didn't protect them better? That thought alone was enough to make me change everything. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you grab a bag of dog food, don't just look at the front. Turn it over. Read every ingredient. Ask yourself, would I eat this? If the answer is no, maybe it's time to choose something different, because at the end of the day, loving our pets isn't just about cuddles and walks, it's about protecting them, even when they don't know they need protecting. And maybe, just maybe, making better choices for them can inspire us to make better choices for ourselves too, because in the end, their health and our health are not separate stories. They're chapters of the same book, and it's up to us to decide how the next chapter will be written. Looking back at everything we've uncovered, I can honestly say that my perspective on pet food, and even on food in general, will never be the same. For years, I thought I was doing the right thing by trusting the big brands, the shiny bags, the comforting slogans. I believed the marketing more than I believed my own instincts. And in doing so, I unknowingly put my dog's health at risk. That realization still stings. But here's the important part. I don't see this journey as a story of guilt. I see it as a story of awakening. Because once you pull back the curtain, once you see what's really in that bowl, you can never unsee it. And that knowledge gives you the power to choose differently, the power to protect, the power to change not only your dog's future, but also your own. For me, the biggest lesson is simple. Love is responsibility. Loving a dog isn't just about belly rubs and treats and cozy nights on the couch. It's about making the hard choices they can't make for themselves. It's about asking uncomfortable questions, like what am I really feeding them? Or, does this company actually care about health or just profit? It's about understanding that every purchase, every scoop of kibble, every decision adds up to a bigger story, one that determines whether our pets thrive or struggle. And here's the second lesson, one that surprised me. Our dog's health is a reflection of our own. The very same traps that exist in pet food cheap fillers, hidden sugars, toxic chemicals exist in human food too. When we demand better for our pets, we remind ourselves to demand better for our own bodies. When we commit to protecting them, we take a step toward protecting ourselves as well. It's not two separate fights. It's one fight with the same enemy, the profit-driven system that hopes we won't ask questions. So what can we do? Start small. Turn the bag around. Read the ingredients. Look for real food, fish, meat, vegetables, seeds instead of vague words like meal or byproduct. Say no to artificial colors, preservatives, and fillers. Support companies that put health before shortcuts. And just as importantly, talk about it. Share what you've learned with other pet owners. The more we spread awareness, the harder it becomes for the industry to keep hiding behind marketing tricks. When I think about my dog now, I feel both gratitude and determination. Gratitude, because she opened my eyes to something I might never have questioned otherwise. Determination, because she deserves better, and so does yours. So let me ask you this. Have you ever actually read the full ingredient list on your dog's food? I'd love to hear your answer. Drop a comment below, and let's start an honest conversation that could help countless pets live healthier lives. And if you found value in this, please consider subscribing to the Nutrition Institute. Your support helps us keep digging, keep exposing the truth, and keep creating content that makes a real difference for you, for your pets, and for the future we all share.